Sarah fell to her knees and cursed the sky. Tears streamed down her cheek, and she landed in the snow. The hot tear melted straight through the snow. It was fueled by the grief of the mother who had lost her child. The disappearance of Amy Thompson left her mother, Sarah, in agonizing suspense. Amy had gone missing 2 weeks ago, and despite the efforts of the police and the community, there were no leads on her whereabouts. They had searched everywhere for their little girl, but nobody could find her anywhere. The police and the community had searched the area and even the nearby woods, but there were no clues. The mother felt like it was hopeless, but she hadn't been looking in the right places. Someone nearby was trying to give her a clue. The mother was completely unaware of the ominous signs that were right in front of her. She tightly held onto her husband and wept inconsolably for hours, unable to fathom the reality that this would be their first Christmas without their daughter. However, one evening, while staring vacantly out of the window, the grief-stricken mother's attention was drawn to something peculiar. She noticed that the Christmas lights adorning her neighbor's house appeared to be eerily similar to the ones her daughter had put up last year. Sarah spent her days and nights pacing around the house, trying to figure out what could have happened to her daughter. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. She couldn't eat or sleep, and the worry was taking a toll on her health. One evening, as Sarah sat by the window, staring out into the darkness, she noticed a subtle pattern twinkling in the neighbor's Christmas lights. It was a pattern that she recognized. Sarah's heart raced as she looked closer at the lights, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The pattern seemed to be moving, almost like someone was signaling her. Without thinking, Sarah rushed out of the house and towards the neighbor's yard. But the mother had no idea what she was even doing. Her motherly instincts told her to bolt. The closer she got, the more terrified she felt. If this was some kind of mistake, then her daughter really was gone. But it was worth one final look to make sure. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. She pounded on the door until the neighbor answered and demanded to know what was going on. The neighbor stared back at Sarah like she was a crazy person. But that's when the mother looked past the neighbor. What she saw inside the house had every fiber of her being screaming to call the police. Sarah Thompson was filled with excitement as the year got closer to ending. Even though it was September, Sarah knew that Christmas would approach out of nowhere. It was her favorite holiday, and she loved everything about it. The decorations, the carols, the food, and most of all, the time spent with her loved ones. As she looked around her community, she saw that everyone else was getting into the jolly spirit too. Her weird community would always start getting into the Christmas spirit a little early. The streets were lined with colorful lights and decorations, and the stores were filled with shoppers looking for the perfect gifts for their friends and family. Tourists thought it was strange to be so prepared for a holiday that was 3 months away, but in the close-knit little town, it was just the norm. Sarah thanked her lucky stars for her amazing family. Her husband, Joshua, was her rock, always there for her, no matter what. And her daughter, Amy, was the light of her world. As she watched Amy's eyes light up with joy as they decorated the tree together, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. But even in the midst of all the holiday cheer, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging feeling of worry. She never anticipated that anything bad could ever happen to her family, but she couldn't help but wonder what would happen if it did. Would she be strong enough to handle it? Christmas would soon approach, and Sarah's worries began to fade away. The thought of her family gathering around the tree, exchanging gifts, and laughing together was enough to put her mind at ease. They enjoyed a delicious dinner, and Sarah would feel grateful for every moment. But in the months before Christmas, disaster would strike. One night, the family heard the sound of shattering glass. which woke them all up, and they rushed to the living room to see what had happened. To their horror, they saw that someone had broken into their house. The evidence was clear as day. Their window was broken. They called the police to come and check on things. But what they had to say made dread creep up her spine. Once the police got there, they investigated the house and got back to her with alarming news. "It wasn't a break-in, ma'am," one of the cops casually said. "What do you mean?" Sarah was quick to ask. Then the officer pointed at the shattered glass. It wasn't spread inside the house, but rather outside the window. It meant that something broke out, not in. Sarah felt anxiety grip her as she wondered what had happened. She immediately rushed to Amy's room. She thought she'd find her sleeping soundly, but she was dead wrong. Once she got to the little girl's room, she saw something that had her in complete shock. Her daughter's bed was empty. She checked the whole house, but Amy was gone. She ran to the officers for help. Nobody knew what was going on. The cops promised her that they would take a look around the neighborhood that night, but Sarah insisted on doing the same. They went street to street, with Sarah calling out her daughter's name out the window while Joshua drove the car. After waking up half of their neighbors, they still didn't find Amy. They finally gave up after 2 hours and headed home. They had to trust that daylight would bring more clues, but it tragically wouldn't. Sarah couldn't sleep. She sipped on her coffee the next morning, a complete wreck. They headed out again and looked even harder than before, but it was the strangest thing. They couldn't find any trace of Amy. Even the cops didn't have a clue as to what happened. Once the community learned about what had happened, they decided to come out in numbers and form a search party. They looked everywhere, from the alleyways to the woods, but there was nothing to be found. Word spread quickly, and everyone gave support to the Thompsons, but Sarah didn't care. All she wanted was her daughter back. Sarah's heart sank as she realized how long it had been since she had seen Amy. She had searched high and low, but to no avail. Just as Sarah was about to give up hope, she decided to venture into the woods. As she walked, she couldn't help but feel like she was on a hopeless mission. But then, out of nowhere, Sarah stumbled upon something that caught her eye. It was a single boot, half buried in the snow. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized that it was Amy's boot. The realization was too much for Sarah to bear, and she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. It was a bittersweet moment, the joy of finding a clue mixed with the pain of knowing that Amy was still missing. Upon discovering the boot, Sarah was filled with a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, she felt relieved to have found a tangible clue that confirmed her friend, Amy, was still out there, somewhere. On the other hand, the discovery also brought forth a sense of dread and raised countless questions about what could have happened to her. Would they be able to find Amy before it was too late? Days turned into weeks, and the mystery deepened. The entire town rallied together, organizing search parties, holding vigils, and distributing missing person flyers with Amy's face plastered across them. The community's spirit was unwavering, but the answers remained elusive. It was like Amy had fallen off the face of the planet. But Sarah remained hopeful. As Sarah grappled with her emotions, she found herself unable to escape the haunting image of Amy's lone boot in the snow. Sleepless nights blurred into one another, and desperation settled in. To her, it seemed Amy had put on a good fight for her life if someone had indeed taken her. She needed to find out more. Joshua could see how his wife was struggling, and it tore him apart. "The police are trying their best to find her, honey," he reassured her. But it was not enough. He hadn't seen her like this before. She was a woman possessed, and it was like she was on the brink of doing something drastic to find Amy. He tried his best to support her, but he, too, was dealing with his own emotions. His wife hadn't even asked how he was. She was on her own mission. He didn't blame her, but he wished that they could have dealt with it together. Sarah had basically taken it upon herself to find their daughter. There was no stopping her. The more Joshua urged Sarah to let the police handle the matter, the more she wanted to be out there looking for Amy. "I can't just sit here and do nothing. There must be something that the police have missed. I am going to find her and bring her home myself." Driven by her determination to uncover the truth, Sarah vowed to leave no stone unturned in her search for answers. As Sarah traversed through the dense woods, she stumbled upon several more clues that could potentially lead her to her missing daughter, Amy. A solitary backpack lay discarded on the ground, not too far away from a jacket that seemed to have been hastily thrown aside. As she pressed on, she came across a few more personal items that belonged to Amy, sending a shiver down her spine. Each time she stumbled upon something that belonged to her daughter, Sarah felt a mix of hope and fear that kept her going. Although she was getting closer to finding her daughter, the thought of what she might uncover was enough to make her heart race with terror. As Sarah trudged through the dense forest, her heart racing with worry, she felt a growing sense of despair with each new item she stumbled upon. First, it was Amy's jacket, abandoned in a crumpled heap on the ground. Then, a few paces further, she spotted a scarf twisted around a low-hanging branch. And finally, she came across the hairbrush, its bristles caked with dirt and leaves. Her mind was reeling with questions. How had all these possessions ended up strewn so haphazardly throughout the woods? And, more importantly, where was her beloved daughter? As Sarah continued her search for her missing daughter, she felt a mix of hope and fear. The woods seemed to close in around Sarah as an eerie silence settled, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath her boots. The weight of the unknown pressed on her shoulders, and a foreboding feeling gnawed at her insides. With each step, the forest seemed to come alive with whispers of uncertainty, and shadows danced on the periphery of her vision. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, matching the rhythm of her anxious breaths. Amy had been in these woods. She had passed through here, either forcibly or she had gotten lost and left the items behind as a clue. Sarah's head was swirling with so many scenarios. The thought of someone forcibly dragging her daughter through these woods made her skin crawl. There was no time to waste. Her daughter was in danger. She could feel it, despite the encroaching darkness and the growing unease. Sarah pressed on, determined to follow the trail of her daughter's belongings. Could there be more items lying around that she had missed? Sarah scoured through the leaves, trying to see if there was anything else. She clung to the hope of finding more clues. Darkness was upon her as she desperately tried to search through the woods. But this time, there was no luck. Sarah sat on the cold ground, defeated. It looked like she had found everything that Amy had left behind for them. Her daughter was smart, and Sarah knew that this was Amy's way of telling them that she was still alive. She gathered all of Amy's precious belongings and held them close to her heart. She sat against a tree as the snow fell to the ground. Tears streamed down her face as she longed for her missing daughter. "Where are you, Amy? Please send me a sign so that I can bring you home. I'm not giving up on you." Each new discovery brought her closer to the truth, but it also heightened her anxiety. However, when the trail suddenly came to a halt, her heart sank. There were no more clues to follow, no more possessions to examine. Sarah was left in a state of confusion, not knowing what to make of the items she had found. Had her daughter left them there intentionally, or had someone else dumped them? The latter possibility filled Sarah with a sense of unease and dread as she struggled to come up with a new plan of action. With a determined look on her face, Sarah reached for her phone and called the police. She knew she had to take action and call the police. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene with their heavy-duty equipment and began their investigation. As they dug deeper and deeper into the ground, Sarah's nerves were on edge. She watched intently, feeling a sense of dread and anticipation at the same time. Suddenly, one of the officers called out, "Wait a minute, I think I've found something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat as the officers carefully unearthed a small bundle wrapped in a faded cloth. The sight of the bundle left Sarah feeling uneasy and anxious about what they might find inside. Sarah's eyes were fixed upon a small box. She had never laid her eyes on it before. She scrutinized it closely, trying to figure out what it was doing with her daughter's clothing. The box was different from anything she had seen before, and it certainly didn't belong to her daughter. The officers, now present in the room, were equally puzzled about the box's origin. They decided to open it to see if they could find any clues. However, upon trying to open it, they discovered that it was locked. Fortunately, they had the necessary tools in their car to unlock it. After smashing the lock off of the container, Sarah and the police could finally see what was inside, but the mother wasn't sure whether or not she'd feel relief or devastation. They'd finally found out what was going on inside of the box, but the mother couldn't watch. She left it up to the police. After a moment, she heard a groan of frustration from them. She turned to see what they had found, but that was the catch. She looked inside the container that the police officers were gathered around, but she couldn't believe what she saw inside. The container was completely empty. It was a disappointment, to say the least. She was sure that it would have the clues that she needed. Time was of the essence, and she needed to find her daughter before it was too late. The devastated mother decided to look in other places to try and find her missing daughter. The mother was so frantic to find her daughter that she didn't look in places she should have. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Christmas fast approached, and she had to come to terms with the fact that Amy wouldn't be around for this holiday. More and more neighbors set up their decorations as December rolled around. But there was one set of decorations that screamed out for Sarah to notice them. The mother should have looked closer, and she might have seen the important clue, but for now, she missed the crucial detail. But the mother would soon notice something that made her heart to race. How could she have been so oblivious to something that was right in front of her this whole time? It would be the key to finding her daughter. Despite an extensive search effort by both the police and the community, the whereabouts of their missing little girl remained a mystery. Every possible lead and location had been meticulously combed through, including the nearby woods. Yet no evidence or sign of the child was found. The mother was left feeling utterly hopeless and helpless, unsure of what to do. Little did she know, though, that a mysterious figure nearby was attempting to provide a crucial clue that could help lead to the discovery of her beloved daughter. The mother was shattered and devastated beyond words, completely oblivious to the ominous signs that were right in front of her. She clung tightly to her husband, unable to contain her inconsolable sobs that echoed throughout the room. It was a harsh reality. She couldn't fathom the fact that this Christmas would be the first without her beloved daughter. Days passed by in a blur of anguish and misery until one evening, while staring vacantly out of the window, the mother's attention was suddenly drawn to something peculiar. As Sarah walked past her neighbor's house, she couldn't help but notice the Christmas lights that adorned the front porch. They seemed to twinkle eerily in the dark, and as she gazed at them, she realized they looked almost identical to the ones her daughter had put up last year. The memory of her daughter's excitement and joy at decorating their own home for the holidays flooded Sarah's mind. She couldn't help but wonder what could have happened to her. The thought was consuming her every waking moment, causing her to pace around the house, unable to eat or sleep. The worry and fear were taking a toll on her health, but she couldn't stop searching for answers. But soon, she would see something that was hard to ignore. As Sarah sat by the window on a chilly evening, her eyes fixated on the pitch-black sky. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to the neighbor's house, which was brightly lit with sparkling Christmas lights. Amidst the flickering lights, she noticed a subtle yet familiar pattern. Her curiosity piqued. Sarah leaned in closer to examine the lights. To her surprise, the pattern appeared to be moving, almost as if someone was trying to communicate with her through the twinkling lights. This unexpected turn of events set her heart racing as she tried to decipher the message hidden within the pattern. Sarah was filled with disbelief as she stood frozen in front of her neighbor's door. She pounded on it frantically, desperately trying to catch her breath. When the door finally opened, she demanded to know what was happening inside. The neighbor, taken aback by Sarah's sudden outburst, stared back at her in confusion, unsure of how to respond. As Sarah peered past the neighbor's form, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her heart started racing, and every instinct in her body urged her to call for help. The scene inside was one of chaos and danger, and Sarah knew that she had to act quickly to get the authorities involved. Sarah saw something she couldn't believe. Amy's sweater, or one just like it, was on the table behind the neighbor. She stumbled back and shakily called the police. The neighbor, realizing what she was doing, darted out after her. Sarah knew she wouldn't be able to call the police in time. Would she become a victim too? But just as she thought it was all over, she heard someone hit the ground. She opened her eyes and saw that Joshua had tackled the neighbor to the ground and detained him. He must have noticed that she was gone and followed her outside. Soon, the police arrived. They searched the neighbor's house and found the Thompsons' daughter unharmed. She had been abducted. It was later discovered that the neighbor had a mental illness and thought that Amy was his little sister who had drowned years ago. Amy was reunited with her family, thanks to her ingenuity. The girl had managed to rig up the Christmas lights on the house to pulse, just the way she and her mom set up their own house each year. It was enough to arouse suspicion. The family ended up having the Christmas they dreamed of and tried moving forward with their lives. The Thompson family celebrated a bittersweet Christmas that year. While they were grateful to have Amy back and safe, the trauma of the ordeal lingered. Amy's resilience and quick thinking had played a crucial role in her rescue, and the family couldn't be prouder of their daughter. Sarah knew all along that their daughter would be smart enough to do something to free herself. The community rallied around the Thompsons, offering support and understanding during their recovery. The incident prompted a closer look at mental health awareness, emphasizing the need for compassion and intervention for those struggling with mental illness. As the new year dawned, the Thompsons embraced a newfound appreciation for the simple moments of joy and togetherness. They understood the fragility of life and cherished every opportunity to create lasting memories as a family. Sarah, once consumed by grief and despair, found strength in the love of her family and the unwavering support of her community. The harrowing experience had changed them all, but it also reinforced the power of resilience and the importance of never losing hope. In the aftermath of the ordeal, the Thompsons faced the challenging task of rebuilding trust and normalcy in their lives. Amy, though physically unharmed, bore the emotional scars of her traumatic experience. The family sought therapy together, using this difficult time as an opportunity to strengthen their bonds. Amy needed things to return to a sense of normalcy. As the seasons changed and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, the Thompsons remained vigilant about supporting Amy's emotional healing. The community, having witnessed the strength of the Thompson family, continued to be a pillar of support. Its Christmas lights that once held a sinister secret now became a symbol of resilience, hope, and the triumph of a family's love over adversity. The Thompsons learned to cherish each moment, understanding that even in the darkest times, there can be a glimmer of light that guides them toward a brighter future. Sarah's actions were swift and impulsive as she darted out of her house and made her way toward her neighbor's yard. Her mind was a blur, and she couldn't even fathom what she was doing. But as a mother, her instincts kicked in, and she knew she had to act fast. As she drew closer to her destination, her fear grew exponentially. Was this all just a misunderstanding, or had something terrible happened to her daughter? Regardless of the outcome, Sarah knew that she needed to take one final look to confirm her suspicions. Binding bonds through beautiful tales. Thank you for watching.